So it's been our tradition now at 4 graduations to ask the class to identify a class speaker. And this year's selected individual was unanimously recommended by his colleagues. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Alex Graham. Alex has a bit of a story, and I think he's probably going to tell you some of it. But I had the pleasure of meeting with him a couple of weeks ago. Alex fits in the admissions world of something I think described as a non-traditional student, which usually means you have a life between college and medical school. And I found the term inadequate. He had a heck of a life. Alex graduated from college a little over 2 decades ago. He was in the business world for 10 years, information technology, and got an MBA from UCLA. And I think as he described it to me, he found it not fully satisfying to him as a person, a professional, and he made a complete change and became an educator in a non-traditional sense, working with young people from rural environments, but also underprivileged or challenged children, even established his own school in the city of Burlington, which he was co-director of until he came to join us. I'm personally very pleased he decided to go to medical school and he chose us. I think the qualities he brings to the profession will be an incredible addition to our future healthcare workforce. And even though he's going to Burlington for residency in family medicine, I'm kind of hoping he comes back so he can take care of me when I get older. So it's my pleasure to introduce this year's class speaker, Alex Graham.
Good morning, doctors of the Maine track class of 2016. Good morning, other Maine track students, parents, family, friends, faculty. Writing a graduation address requires a certain sensitivity to cliches. I've taken this to heart, and I'll promise you that at no point during this speech will I mention Dr. Seuss, or read from him, or tell you to dance as if no one is watching. I may suggest you dress in a purple velvet suit and dance like Prince, but that's pure nostalgia. It's an incredible honor for me to be asked to speak here today. Quite honestly, it's fundamentally changed how I feel about my place in this community amongst all of you who I consider my family, the people who support me and help shape my values. This speech has 3 chapters told through stories of my family. I hope through this to share a few of my thoughts for finding a happy, balanced life as residents and onwards. So this is chapter 1. My dad, who's 86 years old, lost his dad to a sailing accident when he was 10. And in part because of that lingering family trauma, he lost his mother the following year to illness. He was due the year after that to go to boarding school, and a couple of things happened at that point. One is that he was found to be basically blind. He couldn't read the chalkboard at school. He couldn't see the numbers on the trolley cars in Pittsburgh to get around the city. So near the end of that school year, an unusually perceptive teacher noticed that he maybe wasn't quite as stupid as he appeared and suggested he get his eyes tested. And he was set up to have a pair of glasses made, which in those days took a few months. Now, just before he was due to go to boarding school, he got pneumonia, lost about 40 pounds, and so he arrived late to school, 600 miles away in New Hampshire, dragging a trunk that outweighed him, and not knowing a soul. One day, he got a package at the post office, and inside were the lenses that he'd been measured for months before. He says he vividly remembers walking outside into the brilliant October sunshine, and for the very first time in his life, being able to see the leaves on the trees, which were crimson, and the incredible joy that he felt in seeing that and understanding the world around him a little better. I tell this story for a couple of reasons. One is that I love my dad, and I want to share something of his amazing life. The other reason is that I feel as though the study of medicine parallels this experience. We came to Tufts 4 years ago with a vague understanding of the world of medicine. And med school has been a process of finding newfound clarity. For us, learning is such a fundamental part of our med student doctor culture that maybe some of us have forgotten how incremental and slow the process has been. Much like my dad's experience, where he initially understood the world just as dim shapes and colors, we started learning medicine years ago with the first basic tenets of science, then biochemistry and biology. We learned the normal physiology, the pathophysiology of diseases, learned it again for boards and shelf exams, reread when we had patients who had it, discussed the team, we were asked to present at rounds. And so now, it feels like we effortlessly have a clear picture when someone says, 78-year-old with new systolic dysfunction. For me, the awareness of this process crystallized with my very last patient at medical school. It was in cardiology. It's one of the many subjects I love, but I'm terrible at. And I started the month by rereading the Dubin EKG book, drawing yet more pictures of the heart, and asked a lot of foolish questions of my fellows in attending. And then last Friday, I went to see my very last patient as a med student with a little skip in my step. And he turned out to be a far cry from the patients that typically we talk about in a speech like this. He was a soft admission. He'd only had some peripheral edema and an echo showing reduced ejection fraction. Basically, he had a little bit of heart failure and needed evaluating, but he wasn't terribly sick. So aside from having the most charming Down East accent I've ever heard, he was notable for nothing that had to do with him. Seeing him for me was quietly validating and energizing because it took me only a few minutes to evaluate him via his chart. I looked at his EKG, and the little squiggle pattern meant that he had LVH, no prior MI, no other abnormalities. The echo actually made sense to me. Mild MR, EF was reduced. Labs were unremarkable, despite some abnormalities. And what's more, I had in my head like an actual picture of what was going on in his heart, a clear sense of why it might be happening, and a plan of action. So the medicine here is mundane. But what's exciting is the thrill that I'm sure all of us have experienced, the pleasure of competence, being able to look at things that are significantly complex and being able to see clarity and detail and nuance that have never been evident to us before. And in that understanding, finding beauty and joy. This may be the first time someone has equated heart failure with a sense of joy. So just as it has through school, the practice of medicine requires constant learning. What I wish and want for all of us is that every day we can weave the joy and competence of learning into our lives. That rather than it feeling like a burden, we can make learning a central, core, energizing act that this ever-evolving clarity provides daily meaning to our lives. That, for example, better understanding of euvolemic hyponatremia, like really getting it after years of study, can be like seeing the crisp definition of 8,000 red maple leaves standing out against a blue October sky. So this is chapter 2. Oh, actually, I want to say that my dad became a pulmonologist and practiced for many years at UVM, where I'm going for residency, and I don't know which of us is more proud. So now this is chapter 2. My mother was also a physician. She was a small-town doc in the farm town where I grew up, and she would walk through the fields to the east of our farm and over the ridge to her clinic, where she was paid $3.70 an hour. She was sometimes paid in barter. She had one patient, an old farmer, who bathed once a year, whether he needed it or not. And he would give her blood sausage, which she made us eat, still a scarring memory. So for those of you who question if there is life after medicine, she became remarkably involved. She taught physical exam skills at UVM. She was a selectman. She volunteers assiduously with 2 refugee families in Burlington. She works at the town library. She's an artist and a poet, and this is just to name a few of the things. But what's really struck me about my mother is that I frequently meet people in Burlington, and they'll say, "Alex Graham, are you related to Valerie Graham?" And honestly, this happens like 9 times out of 10. They'll say, "Valerie Graham is your mom? I love your mom." So I love my mom, but I think it's kind of inappropriate for everyone else to love her this way too. Then I wonder, like, why do so many people love her? And I think there are a few reasons. One is that she is really very kind and caring. She cares for people, but she cares a great deal for justice. And she's willing to put her actions where her beliefs are. She volunteers for political campaigns with extraordinary energy, really idealism. In town meetings, she'll get up and she'll say things to my mind that are somewhat shocking to people who really often need to hear them. But it's unquestionable that she's speaking with her heart and she's speaking with her head. And that's an unassailable combination. It's something each of us can do and strive to do better every day. So I want you to hold this thought of speaking with your heart and your head, and I want to talk about another member of my med school family, a friend who graduated last year, who was feeling extremely nervous about residency on her way to a high-pressure surgical program. Like all of us, she wanted to be a great resident. Her biggest concern was losing her sense of who she is, like losing herself, because she knew going into surgery she was in some ways an awkward fit. She's someone who spends a lot of time worrying about the bunnies that live by the side of the road, and a kind and deeply compassionate person. Not to speak askance of surgeons, but surgery culture doesn't necessarily reward that kind of person. And she, I think rightly so, is concerned about being changed in a way that would make her less of who she likes in herself. So I gave her a pep talk with some advice that she said recently has been really valuable to her. So you know this is quality speech-worthy advice. It's been randomly tested with an N of 1. And actually, I should have run that by an MPHer before I said that out loud. My advice was that the temptation, or at least the path of least resistance, when immersed in a culture that may be cynical or disrespectful, or simply with demands that exceed what you have to give, the temptation can be to focus inwards and kind of dig deep with resolve to focus on being great within those boundaries. When her chief of surgery told her 1 month in that she was technically very skilled but too nice to ever be a good surgeon, a natural response might be to put aside that niceness and try to be great in the narrow definition of that narrow-minded doctor. Now, I think few of us will find ourselves as cultures that are as egregiously awful as that one, but I think the advice will hold true for all of us and for those of you in non-medical fields as well. What's more important than being great and being perceived as a great resident and meeting the demands and pressures of interns according to the particular culture you're in is being simply good. Striving for greatness, as your evaluators might perceive it, can require us in these high-pressure situations we're going to know to leave behind the things that for each of us make us not just human, but the humans that we like in ourselves. Our unique goodness that has made us good people will make us good doctors. We can learn the skills to succeed in any work environment, but what will make us truly great in a larger worldview is being good. If you're the one intern in your class that helps out your colleagues when you can, focuses on good team outcomes, shows the patient's kindness and compassion beyond the norm, you may not get immediately rewarded. You might not be the one who wins at the ultimate measure of success, which is whose notes are done first. Maybe your attendings may lack some respect for you because you're too nice. But if you focus on doing your job as best you can, at the same time that you stay true to your values, over time, your peers and attendings will begin to see that your patients have good outcomes and are happy, that admissions and procedures seem to go better when you're on the team. And you might not be flashy or chest puffing when you talk, but you're well-reasoned, if not always right. A couple of nights ago, I heard a couple of you talking when we were out about a second-year resident who was described as being a really nice guy when he started, but now is kind of a patronizing, I can't say this word, don't be that guy. Be good, be kind to the nurses, be generous, smile at the orderlies and the janitors. Allow yourself to be really kind to patients. Let the super annoying med student that we all just were know they have value, that we see them as a person and they're part of our team. It's work to do this, especially if you're swimming against the current of your program's culture, and even more so when you're tired and stressed. But when your evaluations come back and over time you're consistently considered an extraordinary resource, you'll know striving to be good rather than great is the way to go. Now, I do want to clarify, the point, my point really is be true to yourself. If you're someone who isn't inclined to be that kind of person, more power to you. And I won't encourage you to perform in a way that divorces you from who you really are. But I hope you'll strive regardless of who you are to bring the best of yourself to the job, no matter what the culture and the pressures may be. This is where my mom, I think, engenders such love in her community. She's true to her values, and she speaks and acts with her heart and her head. So this is the last chapter. It may prove a bit controversial. I'm including it because as med students, we're constantly told to have self-compassion, but I don't think that as a group we're inclined to be good at that, and we're not frequently given the tools. So here, this is a concrete tool which I'll consider a victory if even just one or two of us can benefit from it in the years to come. So there's going to be time during especially this next year where we feel like crap. That especially sometime, probably in the darkness of winter, we're going to feel incompetent, ignorant, daunted, or even defeated by the enormous job of learning medicine. We've been told probably at least 5 times that we may have by this point in residency been responsible for someone's death. We may feel alone, isolated, stressed. The piece of advice I have comes actually from an idea that my brother had a long time ago. He was out for a run, or just generally when he was out for a run and feeling terrible, he'd imagine that instead of being a relatively fit guy wearing, as his wife would tell you, inappropriately tight running shorts, who was sucking wind and sweating, that he was instead someone who was morbidly obese, COPD, multiple bypass surgeries, severe claudication, trigeminal neuralgia. Like, he actually didn't imagine all these things, but I have to justify my $200,000 education. So he would imagine he was this chronically ill, deconditioned guy who all of a sudden, through an act of divine magic, got placed in Bill's body right in the middle of that run. And that person would be like, whoa, like, I can breathe. I feel so good. I'm so light. I'm moving so fast. Why am I wearing such tight pants? and being this debilitated person and suddenly switching into his objectively pretty capable self, the shift in perspective would energize him and get him outside of himself. In the coming years of your practice, when things are really dark and you're feeling as low as you can feel, or even just not as good as you can feel, try this. Imagine that you're your sickest patient, someone who's in pain, gasping for breath, restrained by a catheter, multiple lines, requiring strangers to clean you of your bodily functions. And imagine how that person would feel to suddenly switch places with you, to suddenly be you, standing at the side of the bed, despite all your worries and stress. They'd find themselves so capable, so full of potential and energy, so smart, so physically able, with such financial prospects in such a place to help the world. Because even at our worst, we have training and opportunities and innate gifts. We have infinite possibility to grow and learn and be extraordinary people in the world. It's an extraordinary gift, and one that I hope in our darkest moments we can reflect on. By using this trick, we can allow ourselves to step outside ourselves, to have compassion for our patients at the same time that we see the good fortune we have to be where we are in life, no matter the pain or pressure of our experience. So this is the time in the speech where I should summarize and read a touching quote. I've been really struggling to keep my ADD in check here, and it's determined to pop out, so I'm going to close with a few completely unrelated points. One of them is, and I actually had a whole different speech on this, but it lost in the coin toss. I hope you make travel a priority in your life. No matter where you go, even if it's a beach or real travel where you like explore a place, take a day to meet the folks at the local clinic. Like, arrange it in advance. It's easy to do, and ask if there's anything you can do to help. Medicine is like a golden ticket. It's an entree into any community in the world. And even if you start just in this kind of relatively benign way, I guarantee that it will enrich and engage you and delight you and change you for the better at the same time that you might do some good. Another closer, on Sunday, my best friend in Vermont, Sam, became one of the huge number of cyclists to get creamed by a distracted driver. He just went from the hospital to neuro rehab. He's doing well. He's got some broken ribs and a broken clavicle, but he doesn't feel as bad as the guy who hit him. So this is just a plea to join me in putting your phones down when you drive. And last, for real, family is important. I could not have made it. I could not have made it through without the support of the people I've mentioned, and especially my sister Hillary and my friends here. So no matter where you're going for residency, invest time and energy in building family around yourself. Congratulations, doctors. Thank you all. Good luck.